we sort of dive into the Weekly 10 piece, we just want to give you like a quick overview of Bytes, if you don't know about us, or and also about the partnership between us and Weekly 10. Once that's done, Andy will dive into his piece and he will be discussing the challenges of traditional performance management methods. Then he'll be looking at the future of performance management and what that looks like. And then finally, how Weekly 10 delivers strategic performance management through Microsoft Teams. Right, without further ado, I'm going to hand things over to Ella to talk a bit about Bytes and our Weekly 10 partnership. Over to you, Ella.
Good morning and welcome to the Bytes Weekly 10 webinar. I hope you've managed to get yourself a coffee or a tea, or perhaps an iced coffee or an iced tea this morning after we've been blessed with such lovely weather over the last few days. For the benefit of those who haven't heard this before, I wanted to provide a short overview of Bytes and why we are hosting this webinar today. Traditionally, Bytes began as a software licensing provider before quickly developing a specialism within Microsoft licensing, which we've been doing for 35 years now, whilst developing our supporting specialisms within both security, backup and data center, and enjoying great relationships with best-in-class vendors that you will be familiar with within your own IT environments. As the world of IT has evolved, we've tried to remain agile and ensure our services meet the requirements of our differing customer requirements. And as a result of this and the change that we've seen within the SaaS and software vendor providers, or ISVs as we typically know them, we have formed a specialist ISV division in which I help to lead. So I'm Ella, and as the ISV business development lead here at Bytes, I help to nurture and expand our existing client relationships, whilst also working with prospective clients looking to work with a channel provider and introducing them to our strategic ISV program, a program in which we have designed specifically for those types of businesses. Our approach within this program is tailored to help ISVs optimize and modernize their environments through various licensing entitlements, such as reserved instances and hybrid use benefits, with assistance through our toolset, Quantum for Azure, whilst also providing them with a platform to showcase their solutions and increase their market awareness. So we believe Weekly 10 to have a unique solution that not only complements and integrates with the Microsoft 365 stack, but will help to modernize your approach to performance management within your business. So thank you for your time this morning. And without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to Andy at Weekly 10.
Thanks, Ella. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. So as mentioned before, we're going to give you a little bit more information about actually how, from an IT perspective, you can really help your people services team or your HR team in your organization to really optimize the way in which performance management is carried out in the organization. So in a way, as we say here, how you can be a hero for your HR team, and we'll show you actually how little effort it is to integrate a solution such as Weekly 10 into the Microsoft stack, and particularly into Microsoft Teams itself. And Teams now gives us a really great opportunity to integrate many different parts of our internal processes, particularly around our people processes, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through today. So, as we said, we're going to look at the traditional approaches to performance management. So, how do we typically do performance management? What is the status quo, and why we believe, and what the evidence shows as to why that process is maybe not as optimum or is actually in some cases broken. We'll look at what the future looks like for performance management, and we say future, but actually much of this is available now. And I think with the very strong growth of platforms such as Microsoft Teams, there's a great opportunity to actually bring some of these processes to the fore straight away. And then we'll have a quick look at Weekly 10 and show you actually how the Weekly 10 platform integrates with Microsoft Teams and how you can deliver a really efficient, but more importantly, effective employee experience through the Teams platform itself. So if we look at the way in which we work, and it goes without saying that over the last 12 to 18 months, the way in which we worked has changed quite significantly. But even before that, we know that there was a very significant trend to utilizing technology in the workplace, whether that be in the office, whether that be remote and working from home. And we know over the last 10 years, it's become much more possible to work remotely from the office. But also now in that hybrid environment, we've seen tech really driving the way in which we work. However, when we look at our processes, our people processes within organizations, they really haven't changed. So the kind of humble performance review has changed very little since the 1980s or 90s, and many organizations are still using the same processes. They may have been digitized, but the processes themselves have not been iterated, have not been improved, and in many respects are no longer fit for the way in which we work. And more importantly, they don't meet the expectations of our employees when they are looking at performance, when they're looking at developing their career in organizations. So actually, from an organization perspective, there is a clear differentiator if you can provide processes that really work and develop your employees versus your competitors. And we know what how competitive the market for talent is at the moment, and actually differentiating yourself in this space can be a really strong way of doing it. But we've seen that strong growth in technology driving the way we work, but we haven't seen that change in the way that those HR processes, as we call them, all those people processes, they just haven't adapted to the way in which we work. And we'd say that the traditional way is broken. 80% of employees say that they don't get value from their existing performance management process. And the big challenge with that is that we know that performance management processes do take up a significant amount of time in preparation and obviously in the actual execution of that performance cycle. And when they're not adding value, they can actually have a detrimental impact on performance, because we know that managers find it difficult when using those processes to provide valuable feedback to their employees. And if we break performance management down, it really is truly all about feedback. And we know that those traditional approaches are not actually an effective way of providing feedback. Of course, going to your HR team or to your internal people team and saying that our performance management process is broken is not the most helpful thing. And we do have a few resources. There is a HRD playbook that you can have access to. I think it will be attachment on the call today, and you can share that with your HR teams internally as well. And that gives a really good overview actually of the state of play at the moment and some of those opportunities to really iterate and improve the performance management processes in your organizations. So why do we believe it's broken? Well, this is fundamentally down to the way that process works at the moment. So the process we're talking about is the fact that you typically set objectives at the beginning of the year, and then you infrequently review and have those feedback sessions with managers. And there are three key areas here where the kind of fractured nature of this process becomes evident. Firstly, the fact that the way in which feedback is provided is often untimely. So we do know that if feedback is provided within a week of an event occurring, it's up to 75% more effective than waiting 3 weeks. So there's a massive difference between providing feedback close to an event and the impact it has on the individual to change their behavior or reinforce positive behavior versus the time in which it's given. So providing feedback at a performance review for an event which occurred 6 months ago is very, very ineffective in the fact that it works. Without saying that there's a big gap between the two, it also has a difficult, a limited impact on the individual. Recency bias is also a significant challenge with the existing processes, because it's very difficult for you to reflect on anything other than recent events. So say somebody had a success 9 or 10 months ago, or had a great win that is a great thing to reflect on. Actually, when you come to an end of year review, it's highly unlikely that that's going to be a key part of the discussion, unless it's been well documented or it was very high profile. So these items get missed when it comes to actually providing that feedback during a performance review. It's also very easy to fall into a subjective mindset when providing feedback in this way as well, because without a really good evidence base and without the ability to reflect over that period of time effectively, you typically rely more on impressions and subjectivity to provide that feedback. And we know that providing objective feedback, when it can be given, is a really effective way and a really easy way for managers to engage with that feedback process. And we'll talk a little bit later, but there's a really important aspect of frequency of feedback to build confidence and also build a kind of culture of feedback that makes it easier to give over time as well. The other thing is that traditional processes are not agile enough to reflect changes in goals and objectives. We know, for example, and we know this from a number of clients we've onboarded over the past 12 months, that when we've actually gone in to look at the current processes that they're using in their organizations, a lot of their objectives were pre-COVID objectives, and then you find that they're still actually within their performance management systems or within their goals for the year, that people have those assigned to themselves. And we know at the end of the year, they'll get written off because they're no longer relevant. But when the business changes, people's goals and focus areas need to change as well. And actually, if you're only doing things on an annual basis or even a 6-monthly basis, you're likely to end up with outdated goals that are no longer aligned to where the company or the organization is focused. And then finally, I mentioned this before, but there's a heavyweight process to something such as an annual review. We know that people will spend hours preparing for the discussion. You'll have the discussion, you'll then set more objectives for the next year, and there's a slow process that's involved with that, and it's very much process focused. So it's very much focused on getting the job done rather than actually the content of that review and the feedback that's important in doing so. We also know there's significant admin overhead, and most organizations have a KPI within the people arena that is actually about completion rate of performance reviews. The challenge there is that completion rate of performance reviews, again, is a process focused metric. It tells us that people have ticked a box and completed the review, but it says nothing about the effectiveness of that review itself. Now we'll just run a quick poll. Actually, it'd be great to see what people say about the current way in which you run performance reviews in your organization. So there's a quick question here around how often do you currently run performance reviews? And if we think about this, and you can go ahead and vote now, this is really about how often you have a performance focused conversation. So something which is relatively maybe formal in terms of that feedback that's provided. Many organizations annual, but you may do it quarterly, every 6 months, and it'd be great to see what the current state of play is for everybody on the call here today. So we'll just give everybody a few more seconds. So the options are there, and hopefully we will get the results up. Fantastic. So the results are 69% of people on the call. So only 70% of people say that they run performance reviews in their organization once per year, 19% quarterly, and 13% monthly. So that's a really good reflection, actually, of the wider global view, that most performance reviews are done either every year or every 6 months within organizations. And we'll just dig into that in a bit more detail now to show what that looks like. And this is typically what we'll see. So for some of you doing monthly, I think that's likely to be quite a progressive approach to performance reviews. When you look at 6 monthly or annual, so whether this is a line which is 6 months long or 12 months long, this is essentially what your performance process looks like. You go through the year, and then you have one point in time where you're preparing for that conversation, you're gathering evidence, you're updating your goals, filling in the forms, and this is something which gets in the way of your business as usual. It gets in the way of the standard stuff that you're doing and the value you're adding to the organization. And for managers can spend up to 2 weeks preparing and executing these performance reviews. And what we find, to the point we mentioned before, is that in many cases they're ineffective. So they might be used as evidence-based for bonuses or for promotion, for proposals for promotion. However, actually, in terms of that feedback, and this is the most important aspect of these reviews, is that they tend to be ineffective at doing that. So we're saying kind of what we believe the status quo and why the status quo is maybe not as effective as it could be. So what does performance management look like in the future, and what's available right now? Well, the key to having an effective performance process is really shortening the periods between those feedback hops. So when we talked about feedback being core to performance review and performance management, making that feedback more effective is all about reducing the time between those feedback hops. Now, in some respects, the immediate reaction sometimes is, well, that means that we don't want to be doing a performance review every week or every month, because that's just going to take up more time. But there is a paradigm shift when you look at continuous employee-led performance management, whereby you focus more on reflection. So you empower employees to actually manage more of their own development and their own performance, so they're able to reflect more and plan ahead themselves, but also reduce those time periods to feedback, but make them much more light touch and much easier to do. So to do that, you need to obviously hit a few areas. But the key thing here is that you can make those goals real time. You can make feedback something that happens very close to the event, meaning that actually you get that value straight away, and it also makes that feedback more effective. And you reduce the recency bias. So it means that actually you're talking about recent events in that way as well. Continuous employee management also looks like a more objective process. So if you're able to have conversations, if you're able to record reflections on a more continuous basis, you will build up a better evidence base for the year. And what that means is that it's much easier to be objective when providing feedback to employees, and also when employees are providing feedback to their managers. That also makes it more transparent, because you've got more of a continuous as we say, evidence base, and it just means that you're ending up where more of the issues and more of the challenges are on the table sooner, rather than waiting for them to build up to that kind of one meaningful conversation that you might have. It also means that you can align and modify those goals or those objectives through the year to make sure that your objectives or your goals are still aligned to those of the organization. And finally, making sure that it's people focused, and the fact that development isn't just about that one thing we think about once per year, but actually that it happens throughout the year, so that it's an ongoing process. And again, that people are empowered to own their own development and have the opportunity to do that. Without the tools to reflect, and without the tools to feedback, people don't have the ability to focus on their own continuous development. And it's also moving away from the fact that you always need to send somebody on a course for professional development within the workplace. Most people develop in their roles through experience and through exposure within the organization than they do going on a training course. So it's really important that 70% of that continuous development is actually just self-development through everyday work and focus. And finally, one of the side effects, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, from having a more continuous approach is you actually end up with a lot more data from a management information perspective. So you're able to actually look more at engagement as well as performance, because if people are continually focused on that kind of approach to everyday performance, you're actually going to start to bring out more insights. And we'll talk a little bit later about the fact you can use AI and machine learning to actually understand more about your organization, which includes both the performance aspect, but also the engagement side as well. So we'll talk in a bit more concrete terms, and we'll talk a little bit more about what Weekly10 does to really address the issues with traditional performance management. So our approach, and this is a trend which is growing very strongly in a market which is growing very, very fast, which is typically replacing the incumbent large-scale performance management solutions, which are typically that one-off every 6 months, maybe a mid-year review and an annual review, to move to something more continuous. And our approach is that you utilize frequent check-ins. So these frequent check-ins, as you might guess with Weekly10, are weekly. And some of you may say, wow, a weekly performance review. And check-ins are in no way aligned to the actual performance review conversation. Check-ins are designed and they're delivered through Microsoft Teams itself. They're designed as a light touch check-in once per week that allows employees to reflect, so they're able to just journal any of the challenges, any of the success that they've had during that week, and obviously feedback to the manager anything that they want to update on, whether it's support they require, or whether it's celebrating the success that they've had within a project, or recognizing somebody else. But the key thing about the check-in is it's 10 minutes to take yourself away from that business as usual and think more strategically. It's very easy for employees to get stuck into the day-to-day, and then weeks go by and months go by where actually you're focusing purely on tactical initiatives rather than focusing on that strategic view. And check-ins allow that reflective time and allow the opportunity to raise issues, but also reflect on successes as well. So the check-in is designed as an asynchronous approach, and we'll show this within the platform shortly, but it's designed to provide you with this asynchronous check-in, which works fantastically well in remote and hybrid environments, because it means that the manager and the employee don't need to be on the same call at the same time. And it means that employees can check in and then managers can quickly provide some feedback when they have chance to review that. We also find it's great when managers are on holiday or away from work, because when they come back, again, they can have a really quick checkup with where the employees are up to. The focus of those check-ins is around open questions and reflection, but also around goals and OKRs. So if you have got objectives set for the year, you're able to review those, iterate those, and make sure that they're actually still relevant to the organization. Those check-ins then feed into regular conversations. And we often find this varies per organization. One of the sweet spots we've found with many organizations is a quarterly review. In some organizations, that will be a monthly one-to-one, and then it will all feed into an annual kind of line in the sand meeting that brings everything together. The key thing here is those conversations need to be zero prep. And the check-ins allow those regular conversations to require no prep time whatsoever, including the performance reviews. Because when you're reflecting on a weekly basis or a really frequent basis, you have that evidence base. And when you come to those conversations, it can be really focused on the feedback, using that objective evidence that's been collected over that period of time to actually focus on the conversation, on the feedback, and then the action. And we'll show how this works in a moment. We'll take you through the check-in aspect, and we'll also show you how they feed in to those regular or annual conversations that you may have within the platform itself. So you don't lose anything with those formal meetings and those formal conversations. You actually gain a lot by that information that's coming in from those reflective self-review and feedback check-ins. The really important thing to note here as well is the element of creating habit. So if we do something frequently, typically on a weekly basis, we build a cadence and we build a habit of providing feedback and reflecting. And it's really important to do something on a really regular basis to do that. And by doing that, you're not just enabling the process, you're also building a culture where people reflect and they provide feedback, and that transforms the culture of an organization to one where transparency is really important, and that that people aren't afraid to provide or receive feedback, which is absolutely fundamental to development. So with that in mind, there is another really important aspect to how Weekly10 delivers that. So we've talked about the process, but there is also a really key element with the integration side. So we talked about Microsoft Teams, and the important thing to note there is that providing a process such as this needs to be as frictionless as possible. So how can you deliver a regular check-in? How can you deliver performance management in a way which is accessible and it's not another piece of software? And that's why we decided, and this is one of the key reasons for the partnership with Bytes, to deliver Weekly10 through Microsoft Teams. So that means that there's no new software, everything's single sign-on, deployment is really quick, there's no verification of employees required, and everything just works as seamlessly as possible, reducing emails and making a performance management solution available through Microsoft Teams rather than through another piece of software. We also integrated with Active Directory, so again, there's very little administration required from a HR perspective and an admin perspective, and we see really high adoption rates because it's in a platform that they use every day. And one of the important things here is it reinforces the use of Microsoft Teams for other aspects of work life, whether that be calls, whether that be integration with SharePoint and communication through Teams and channels, but it also reinforces the fact that performance is an everyday thing that we do because you can manage that directly through Microsoft Teams without another piece of software. So we'll go in and just very quickly show how this is achieved through the Microsoft Teams platform. We'll bring up the Teams app, we'll show you what it looks like from an employee's perspective, a manager's perspective, and then also have the opportunity to just see how you're able to automate that flow between a reflective feedback check-in through to a performance review itself within the system. Okay, great. So I'll quickly share my screen. Fantastic. So within Microsoft Teams, I'm sure many of you will be familiar with third-party applications which can be installed within Microsoft Teams. The Weekly10 app itself is a Microsoft verified application which is deployed directly through AppSource. So it's available on AppSource and it can be provisioned for everybody within the organization. You can link in with the Active Directory, as I said, and that means that you automatically add and remove users from the system as and when required. This can be delivered for the employee and the manager entirely through the Teams environment, so there's no need to go into any other application itself. We're now logged in as Joe, and you'll see that Weekly10 app appears on the left-hand side, and then Joe has this dashboard. They're able to see where they're up to in terms of their current check-ins that we talked about, and then they can also see any performance reviews. So in this case, we've had some quarterly reviews, and we've got an annual review as well. They're able to manage their goals within here as well, and we support OKRs and goals. So if you're familiar with OKRs, or if you're not familiar with OKRs, they are objectives and key results. Similar to goals, but they take a slightly different approach, a bit more of a transparent approach in the way that they're set and the way that they're tracked. But you can obviously facilitate the creation and management of goals through the platform. And then you also have the ability to record training. So if you are attending training, you can log that within the system as well. The key focus of the platform, as we say, is the check-ins and then the performance conversations. So when you go to complete a check-in, you receive a notification the employee clicks on the link and they go straight into this screen here, which asks them a number of questions. And these questions are typically set at the org level, but they can be specialized to different functions and different parts of the organization. You'll see I've already saved a draft just so you don't have to watch me typing all morning. And we can see we've got some questions around achievements and challenges. You might have a question about support. You can drop in pulse type questions as well. And then you have the opportunity also to mention people within the organization. So I could say, you know, Hannah, thanks for your help with the onboarding this week. And Hannah will receive that notification. And that in turn can feed into her own reflection and her own performance review as well. It's possible to connect any of these questions into channels as well. So quite popular with some of our clients is to be able to connect the recognition question through to a Teams channel. So for example, a kudos or a thanks channel, which is available publicly to people in Teams as well. Once again, kind of reinforcing that connection between the performance management and the reflection piece through to what you see within the whole Microsoft Teams platform. Finally, you can also see you're able to track your goals or your OKRs within here as well. So you're able to update these as you're going through the year rather than just once a year. And again, you can iterate and change these as the organization's strategy or focus changes as well. When it's done, it's really simple. It gets submitted, goes through to the manager. Typically, these check-ins take no more than 5 minutes. If it takes more than 10 minutes, it's no longer a check-in, it's a review. But these are really about that self-reflection and feedback, which is really important as part of that continuous development that you would see within the organization as well. So once that goes through to the manager then has a really good opportunity to be able to provide feedback. So you'll see here, if we go over to the manager's screen, they have a really good overview of where their team are up to, and then they can go in and review the manager's check-in. So we just submitted this check-in, and the manager has the opportunity to provide feedback, a thumbs up, or for example, a text response. And again, the employee can respond to that. And we also have a really neat feature in here called pass up, which allows parts of the check-in to be passed up to the next manager in the organization, or again, passed across to somebody else in the organization that would allow the sharing of that information as well. So it's a really quick and easy way for managers to understand where their employees are up to, and then obviously provide that specific feedback. There may be the need to spin off an individual conversation, of course, but the idea here is there's always that cadence of feedback and reflection that's going on within the organization. You can do exactly the same things with goals as well. And you can even ask managers specific questions as well if you want them to reflect and provide feedback that isn't included in the check-in already. Okay, and then from the check-in, if we then move back to the employees view, you then have the opportunity to, of course, perform quarterly, monthly, annual reviews within the platform itself. Now, there's a key difference between running a review in this way than if you were to run it as a standalone process. And we'll demonstrate that now. So if we were to go in and we've got an annual review in progress here, we can go in as Joe. And when Joe's annual review loads up, and these templates are obviously configurable depending on the organization, you'll see that kind of what you would normally see, a blank form. So the fact that employees typically go into a performance review and they're going to prep for the performance review and they have a blank form. But the great thing about connecting this through to the weekly check-in is you can quickly import items from your check-in. So what are your achievements this year? All you need to do is click on view responses, and that allows you to go into the system and select from whenever you want the different aspects of the of your check-in over the year, and they automatically get imported within the review itself. So again, you have it really quickly. Again, we can click on challenges, we can reflect on our recognition, and we automatically get our goals fed in to our performance review. If we reflected on training development, again, it's all there ready to go. So because we have this connection back to the check-in, actually the prep time for a review can be cut down to virtually nothing, because we have that objective evidence and it's really quick to prep, and we're good to go. So once the employee is done, sent to next stage, and that simply goes through to the manager to go and have that conversation. So you can see how we can go to having the value of a continuous check-in, but then also feeding that back into the overall review as well. Okay, fantastic. The other thing to note as well is, because you're providing this data on a regular basis, and the employees are checking in on a regular basis, you end up having a really good overview of what's happening in the organization, not just from a performance perspective, but also from an analytics perspective. So you'll see here, if I go over to our web dashboard, all of our analytics capability is available through a single sign-on web dashboard. You're able to reflect on things like sentiment, so sentiment within the organization based on the responses that have been provided, but also reflect on engagement as well. So we have an engagement score, which allows you to look at, for example, here, the different types of employee engagement based on the way in which employees are interacting with the system and the way in which they're engaging with the everyday performance aspects of the check-in, and of course the reviews as well. Okay, great. So we'll go back to, we'll just go back to the screen here. So we've reflected on kind of how that's integrated with Teams. So what you see is the continuous process, that continuous everyday feedback process, and then obviously the fact that you can bring that together for those one-to-one discussions in a really efficient, effective, and objective way through the platform itself. I'll just talk about one client who's been running this for 18 months now. This is a really good example of a client. This client is based in New Zealand. They're a professional services and accountancy firm, but this is reflected across a large number of our clients. We work with clients from 20 employees right the way through to tens of thousands of employees, utilizing the platform through Teams to deliver their performance management, to deliver their performance management processes. And in fact, over the last 12 months, we've moved from delivering performance management through Teams for 40% of our clients through to 75%. So there's a real big driver to actually consolidate these processes into an environment such as Microsoft Teams. And when you use it through Microsoft Teams, you actually have a much higher level of participation, and you get much more benefit from some of those other key metrics as well. The other great thing about having that continuous approach is that you're also able to pull the data, as I said, from the analytics perspective, from within Weekly10. So as well as being able to enable the performance objectives and the engagement objectives of the organization, you're also able to measure the change over time and the impact that these processes are having within the organization. So a great example here from this professional services company that shows actually when they only had that once a year process, they struggle to have a framework for managers really to provide that continuous approach to performance and engagement. And some of the things they saw, and this is over a 12-month period, they had a 95% participation in a weekly check-in, which is a really high rate. Anything over 75% is great. The check-in is typically optional. Every week, 50% of people recognize other people through the platform. Again, without having to go to a separate recognition system, they're able to do that through Microsoft Teams. They saw a 60% increase in positive conversations measured by sentiment, and sentiment within our platform is measured using AI. So it looks at the natural language and understands how positive or negative those conversations are. So you can understand whether people are talking more positively or more negatively as part of their kind of everyday. 95% of people within the organization had goals aligned to strategic goals, and they saw 80% reduction in time spent on review preparation. Actually, with many of our clients, we see this even higher. So we always target for a 90% reduction in prep time, but even 80%, as you can imagine, is a massive win. And it's not just the fact that it's more effective, it's the fact that that it's more efficient, it's actually more effective as well, which is really important. And using this process of everyday performance, they also saw a significant increase in employee engagement metrics, so a 40% increase over the 12-month period. So just to reflect on what we've covered, so we talked about that traditional approach, the kind of big bang approach to performance management, which is that 1 or 2 meaningful conversations per year, and the fact that it doesn't deliver for employees, and it also makes the job harder for managers. So it's much harder for managers to provide feedback when they only have that conversation once or twice per year, because it's not a normalized process for them. It's something which in some cases can be quite a stressful event. We've also talked about how you can move from that traditional approach to something which is more continuous and actually is very supportive of both remote and hybrid aspects of work, where people might not get as much face time as they had previously, and how you can deliver that, of course, through Microsoft Teams and have something which is a really efficient, effective process without more software. In many cases, reducing your software estate and consolidating that into the Microsoft stack and into Microsoft Teams itself. So that covers what we're showing you in terms of the that performance process. There are a couple of opportunities to learn more as well. So there will be a form later on if you do want to book a one-to-one demo with one of our HR customer success partners. They're able to provide a one-to-one demo. It's also possible to try Weekly10 out in a sandbox, which allows you to get generated data and actually understand, without having to enter the data yourself, how actually you could adopt a process such as this using a tool like Weekly10 as well. So with that, I'll pass back to Ella, and to Daniela, and she'll just cover off the final bits today.
Great, thank you, Andy. Thank you for your very insightful presentation. We've received a couple of questions, so I'm just going to touch on those first. So please do feel free to, over the course of the next couple of minutes, just to send over any questions you do have. If not, as I say, after the call, if they do spring to mind, then just drop them over to timemore@bytes.co.uk. So the first question we received, Andy, is how does the AI part of Weekly10 work?
So the AI element of the platform is really focused around the engagement aspect. So if you think about the fact you've got these ongoing conversations, if they're weekly or every couple of weeks, there's obviously a lot of what we would call qualitative data. So you're not asking people how you're feeling and all this type of stuff. People are reflecting on their challenges, their successes, and various other aspects of their work life. And what the machine learning and the AI allows us to do is take that natural language and actually understand it, so interpret it. And what the AI does is it essentially does sentiment analysis on the text which has been provided. And this is quite a common a common way of analyzing text data these days. It's often done in marketing, and it's done on social media to understand sentiment levels for organizations, but it can now be used, of course, internally to understand how positive or negative people are feeling. And we have some really good examples over this past year of external factors within organizations also having impact on sentiment. So everything that we've been through over the last 12-18 months, and seeing actually how that's impacting people's attitudes through that sentiment. So the core aspect of the use of AI is around sentiment analysis. However, as I touched on during the demo, we also have a tool called 10 Pulse, which is our own proprietary algorithm, which was developed in partnership with Bangor University in North Wales, and utilizes sentiment analysis together with platform interaction to understand the engagement levels within the organization, and that has around about a 78% accuracy versus your standard engagement survey that you might do on a 12 monthly basis and ask 70 questions. So there's a couple of ways that we use AI within the system to help understand the health of your organization, on top of the fact that you have the kind of continuous approach to performance.
Brilliant. Thank you, Andy. Another question's come through. So can this also work for corporate performance management for things like KPIs and delivery on large corporate projects? If so, can you extract reports to feed into reporting to stakeholders?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways of using the platform in that way. So our goals and OKRs parts of the platform is quite a detailed part of the platform. So it's quite flexible in the fact that you can create OKRs or goals at different levels. So you can create org level, department, team level, group level goals, and then they could be cascaded or split into projects, and then obviously scheduled in within the platform itself. We then have a bunch of reporting off the back of the system, which allows you to either look at the analytics within Weekly 10. So if you wanted to have a look at you know, the goal completion rates or the RAG statuses over time, you can extract those and view those within Weekly 10. You can run reports, or you can connect Weekly 10 through to Power BI if you're using Power BI internally, to be able to report through that platform as well. The advantage again of using something like Weekly 10 in Teams is the fact that you're able to integrate with quite a few other Microsoft platforms such as Power BI. So yeah, whether you're reporting internally in Weekly 10, exporting it to a report, or getting that through something like Power BI, you can get that data out of the system.
Brilliant, thank you, Andy. So how easy is it to roll out Weekly 10 through Teams? Another user asks.
Yeah, pretty straightforward. So if you're familiar with Teams kind of profile groups, so policy groups, should I say, not profile groups, it's very simple. So within the Teams admin, all IT admins need to do is allocate people to a policy group and then assign Weekly 10 to that policy group, or you assign it to everybody within the organization. And when that happens, the app will automatically be pushed down to employees within the organization within 12 to 24 hours. And as soon as it gets pushed to them, they get a welcome message saying, hey, welcome to Weekly 10. So that's how easy it is to kind of roll out. It's kind of a 10-minute job. The optional parts to the platform are the fact that you can also integrate with your Active Directory. And again, that's pretty simple. You just provide the permissions to Weekly 10, and then it reads your Active Directory data on a daily basis and automatically updates your organization structure within Weekly 10. So if somebody moves manager, they'll be moved within Weekly 10. So you have that option. And we've also recently, and I didn't touch on this today, we've also added the ability to integrate with your O365 calendars. So when we talk about those one-to-one or performance conversations, Weekly 10 can actually automatically book in those meetings, those face-to-face meetings, into the diary of the manager and the employee. And it does it in a way that means that the manager can move that meeting if they want. So if they do want to move it around, they can do that. But it provides you data on those meetings actually happening, and then ties them back, of course, to the review form itself that you get within Weekly 10. So there's a couple of optional integrations, which are the Active Directory sync and the calendar integration, which would just be enabled on top of rolling it out through Teams.
Brilliant, thank you. We received another question. So how does Weekly 10 sit alongside Microsoft Viva?
So I know there's quite a lot of questions on Viva recently, because Microsoft have obviously launched, made a big launch with the platform. So Viva is an employee experience platform fundamentally. And what that means is it's designed to bring together a number of aspects of employees' experience within the workplace into one single place. But essentially it's a hub around which a number of different applications run. So the first item that's coming out on Viva, the first major items are the almost like kind of a you know, an intranet within the platform, so similar to what you had on SharePoint, so a hub for employees to get information, and then also an LMS, so a learning management part to the platform. A tool such as Weekly10 and the way in which Weekly10 integrates with Teams means that Weekly10 sits inside of Viva to provide you with the performance management engagement aspects that can then be linked into your learning management within Viva, or the way in which you're doing internal comms. So it very much sits alongside Viva and integrates with those different aspects of the platform, including the LMS side and then also the internal comms. So it's kind of part of the Viva platform within Teams itself, but obviously is called out as an app on the left-hand side.
Brilliant, thank you, Andy. I believe that's everything. Well, thank you all for your questions, and thank you, Andy, for your responses. As mentioned, if you do have any other questions, then please drop it over to tellmemore@bytes.co.uk. Thank you for joining us this morning, and thank you to both presenters, Ella Goodhart and Andy Roberts. This session will be recorded, so please look out for the email tomorrow morning. Right, thank you for your time and have a wonderful rest of the day.
Cheers, thanks guys.